In the quiet halls of a hospital, where every step echoes like a secret, a man walks in, expecting nothing more than another ordinary day. But in one impossible moment, his world shatters. At the end of a sterile corridor, he locks eyes with a woman he thought he had buried in his past forever. This isn't just a reunion. It's a story about fate, about how love between siblings can survive tragedy, lies, and even death itself. The clock had just passed 7 in the morning when Michael Turner pulled his car into the hospital parking lot. The sky hung heavy with grey clouds, and a thin drizzle streaked across the windshield. It was the kind of morning that carried the weight of memory, the kind of morning where silence felt louder than words. For Michael, walking into hospitals had become routine. His job as a medical sales representative required constant visits. But today felt different. There was a heaviness in his chest, a shadow pressing down on him that no amount of professionalism could shake. Michael had lived most of his life with an emptiness he could never explain. His parents were killed in a tragic car accident when he was still a teenager. But worse than losing them was losing his little sister, Emily. The crash had been violent, and the aftermath chaotic. Michael was told Emily didn't survive. He never saw her body, just a closed casket and whispered condolences. Doctors, police, relatives, all repeated the same story until it etched itself into his soul. She's gone, and she's never coming back. He tried to live. He built a career, had relationships that came and went, but nothing filled the hollow inside him. Every night he carried the same thought into sleep. What if? What if she somehow survived? People told him it was grief-talking, the wishful thinking of a boy who couldn't let go. But Michael knew the human heart keeps its own truths, and in his, Emily never stopped calling. That morning he pushed through the revolving doors of St. Joseph's Hospital, nodding quickly at the receptionist before heading down the familiar hall. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The polished floor reflected his steps. The steady beeping of machines echoed faintly from behind closed doors. And then he saw her. At the far end of the corridor, a young nurse walked toward him. Dark blonde hair pulled back, blue scrubs neat but simple, a stethoscope swinging with each step. Her eyes, those unmistakable green eyes, met his for only a second. But that was all it took. Michael froze. His pulse spiked. The folder in his hand slipped and crashed onto the floor, scattering papers across the tiles. He didn't move to pick them up. His gaze was locked on her. His mind screamed impossible. His chest whispered, "It's her." The nurse stopped, startled by his reaction. For a moment, confusion clouded her face. But behind that, buried deep, Michael swore he saw the same flicker of recognition, the kind that rattles your soul. Memories flooded back in an instant. Emily's laugh echoing in the backyard, her small hand gripping his, the way she'd run into his arms after school. The little sister he swore he'd protect. And now, standing here in a hospital hallway, Michael felt like he was seeing a ghost. His lips trembled as he forced out a single word, the name he hadn't spoken aloud in decades. Emily. The nurse's body stiffened. Her eyes widened as if the name had struck a hidden nerve. She gripped the folder in her hands tighter, her breathing quickening. Michael's knees nearly buckled. He could barely believe what his eyes were telling him. But in his soul he knew this wasn't a stranger. This was the sister he had buried only in memory. And in that sterile hospital corridor, Michael Turner's life changed forever. Michael stood frozen in the hallway, his breath shallow, his chest rising and falling like he had just run miles. Around him the world carried on as normal. Nurses rushed by, stretchers squeaked across the floor, monitors beeped steadily from distant rooms. But to Michael everything had gone silent. There was only her. The nurse hesitated, stopping halfway down the corridor. She shifted the folder in her hands, uncomfortable under his piercing stare. Michael's eyes darted to her ID badge. His heart stuttered. Emily Carter, registered nurse. The letters blurred as his vision filled with tears. The name hit him like a hammer. Not just Emily, not just a coincidence. Emily Carter. Michael's pulse roared in his ears. His sister's name. The same eyes. The same face he had carried in his memory all these years. He staggered forward, voice trembling. "No, this can't be." The nurse's brows knit together. Her confusion deepened, but there was something else too, something flickering behind her guarded expression, a recognition she couldn't quite place. Michael swallowed hard, his throat dry. Emily. The name left his lips like a prayer, like a curse, like the last breath of a man who'd held it inside too long. The nurse stiffened. Her eyes widened, and for a moment she looked like she might collapse. Her grip on the folder tightened, her knuckles white. Michael took another step, his whole body trembling. He couldn't stop staring at her, the curve of her jaw, the depth of her eyes, the way she held herself. It was her. It had to be her. Tears welled and slipped down his cheeks. His voice cracked as he tried to steady it. You're my sister, Emily Turner. You're supposed to be dead." The words echoed in the sterile corridor, sharp as broken glass. The nurse blinked rapidly, her breathing shallow. She shook her head slightly as if rejecting the thought, but her eyes betrayed her. She couldn't deny the tremor in her hands, the way her chest rose and fell too quickly. Finally, she whispered, her voice trembling. Who are you?" Michael pressed his fist against his mouth, his emotions threatening to consume him. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to answer. "My name is Michael Turner. I had a little sister named Emily. They told me she died in a car accident." His voice cracked. He lowered his hand and looked at her with desperation. "But I know it's you. It has to be you." The nurse's eyes filled with tears. Her lips parted as if to speak, but no words came. Her mind spun in chaos. For years she had felt flashes, fragments of a boy's voice calling her name, shadows of laughter, dreams of a home that never made sense. She had dismissed them as childhood fantasies, tricks of the mind. But now, staring at this stranger who called her by a name buried in her soul, those fragments burned brighter, her breathing quickened, her heart pounded. She whispered again, almost to herself, "Emily Turner." Michael's tears flowed freely. His hands trembled at his sides, aching to reach out, to pull her close, to never let go again. But he held back, afraid that a single move would break the fragile reality hanging between them. The hospital corridor suddenly felt like a threshold between two worlds, one of grief and lies, and another of truth and impossible reunion. And Michael knew, whether she remembered or not, he had found her. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Michael's tears fell freely, his entire body trembling, while the nurse, Emily, stood frozen, clutching the folder like it was her only anchor. Her lips quivered. The name he had spoken lingered in her mind like an echo she couldn't silence. Emily Turner. It was foreign and familiar all at once, like a word she had forgotten but somehow always known. Finally, she managed a whisper. "I don't remember. Not everything. Just flashes, fragments." Michael's breath caught. What kind of fragments? Emily closed her eyes, forcing herself to reach into the dark recesses of her memory. Images flickered in and out. A boy's laughter, the warmth of a hand holding hers, a tree in a backyard, raindrops on a window, a night filled with sirens and screams. Then blackness. She opened her eyes, tears brimming. "I see." A boy, smiling, protecting me, calling my name. But I don't know if it's real or just a dream. Michael's voice broke as he stepped closer. That boy was me. I promised I'd always protect you. Her chest tightened. She looked down, trying to steady her breath, but the pieces of memory kept pressing in. Dreams she had dismissed for years now took on weight. She remembered nightmares from her foster childhood, someone calling for her in the dark, crying her name. They had haunted her, but she had never understood why. Michael, desperate, pressed a trembling hand to his heart. "I buried you in my soul, Emily. They told me you were gone, but I could never let go. I prayed for years, decades, that somehow you survived." Emily's tears spilled over. She shook her head, overwhelmed. "Why can't I remember? Why was I told I was alone?" Michael stepped closer, his voice raw. "Because someone stole you from me. Someone lied." The air between them felt electric, charged with grief and revelation. Emily hugged herself tightly, trying to contain the storm raging inside. She looked at Michael with trembling lips. "All my life I felt wrong, like something was missing, like I belonged somewhere else. And now you're telling me I did." Michael's tears blurred his vision. He wanted to hold her, to take back every lost year, but he knew this moment was fragile. Instead, he whispered, steady and certain, "You were never alone. I never stopped looking for you. Never." Emily staggered back a step, overwhelmed, her mind spinning. "If this is true, then why don't I remember you fully? What really happened to me?" Michael's chest heaved as he fought to control his anger, his sorrow, his longing. He knew he didn't have the answers yet. He only knew the truth of his heart, that this woman was his sister, whether memory agreed or not. He wiped his tears, determination flashing in his eyes. "Then we'll find out together. We'll uncover everything they kept from us." Emily looked at him, really looked at him for the first time. She saw the pain etched into his face, the hope burning in. Later that afternoon, the siblings walked through the faded doors of St. Mary's, a hospital older and quieter than the one where they had just reunited. Its brick walls were weathered, and the automatic doors creaked like they carried decades of secrets. Inside, the air was heavy with the musty smell of old antiseptic. Nurses in pale uniforms moved briskly past them, their footsteps echoing in the tiled halls. Michael's heart pounded as they approached the records department. At the desk, a tired receptionist looked up. "Can I help you?" Michael leaned in, his voice steady but urgent. "We're looking for patient files from many years ago. My sister was admitted here as a child after an accident." The woman shook her head slowly. "Those are archived. Family only." Emily took a deep breath and stepped forward. "My name is Emily. I believe I was a patient here. Please, I need to know the truth." The receptionist studied her face for a long moment, then reluctantly nodded. After several tense minutes, she returned, carrying a stack of yellowed folders. Emily's hands trembled as she flipped through them, until she saw it. Her own name staring back at her, Emily Turner. Michael's breath caught. He grabbed the folder and read aloud, his voice shaking. "Admitted with head trauma, broken ribs. Transferred for further care." His eyes darted to the final line. "Responsible guardian, Richard Carter." Emily's stomach dropped. The name sent chills through her veins. Carter. That's the name I grew up with. The name they gave me. Michael's vision blurred with rage. "So that's it. You didn't die, Emily. They handed you over to this man. And no one ever told me." Emily clutched the papers to her chest, tears streaming down her face. "Why? Who was he? Why would he take me?" Michael stared at the page, his jaw clenched, his heart burning with fury and determination. "We'll find out. And when we do, we'll finally know why our lives were stolen from us." In the dim light of St. Mary's Records office, the past was no longer just shadows and fragments. For the first time they had proof, and it pointed to a man named Richard Carter. Michael's hands shook as he held the faded hospital records. The name Richard Carter burned into his mind like fire. The man who had signed as Emily's guardian. The man who had erased her identity and left Michael to grieve a grave that never held his sister. Emily sat beside him, her knuckles white as she clutched the folder. "I don't understand. Who was he? Why would he take me?" Michael's jaw tightened. "We're going to find out. Whoever he was, he stole you from me. And I won't rest until we know the truth." That night, they drove straight to the city library, their nerves raw with urgency. The building was dimly lit, filled with the smell of dust and old paper. They found a corner computer and began their search. Emily typed the name slowly, Richard Carter. Dozens of results appeared. Some were ordinary records, birth certificates, property deeds, but one article stood out. Michael leaned closer as Emily clicked it open. A black and white photo appeared on the screen. A man with silver hair and sharp eyes, dressed in a doctor's coat. The headline read, "Dr. Richard Carter, honored for community service." Michael read aloud, his voice tight. "Carter, longtime director of a small community hospital, praised for his work with children in need." Emily's stomach twisted. She didn't recognize the face, yet something in her gut recoiled. A fragment of memory flickered, cold hands checking her pulse, a shadow leaning over her bed. She shuddered. I think I've seen him before. In my dreams, in pieces of memory. I thought it was nothing, but..." Michael clenched his fists. It wasn't nothing. It was him. They dug deeper, scrolling through archives. An obituary surfaced. Richard Carter, deceased 3 years earlier. Survived by no family. A decorated doctor, remembered as a pillar of the community. Emily's eyes burned with tears. Everyone thought he was a hero. But he stole me. He lied to me my whole life. Michael leaned closer, his voice fierce. Then we expose him. Dead or not, the truth needs to come out. And we'll start with where he lived. The obituary mentioned a small town just an hour away. Without hesitation, Michael grabbed the keys. They drove in silence, the night pressing heavy against the windshield. Emily stared out the window, her reflection pale in the glass, clutching the folder as if it were her lifeline. Finally, they arrived. The town was quiet, streets lined with old houses and dim street lamps. They parked near a modest cafe, hoping to find someone who remembered Carter. Inside, the air smelled of coffee and warm bread. Locals gathered at small tables, their voices low. Michael approached the counter and asked carefully, "Do you remember Dr. Richard Carter?" The room fell quiet for a moment. An elderly man in the corner raised his head, his eyes narrowing. "Carter? Oh yes, everyone knew him. Good doctor, they said. Respected, but there were whispers." Emily's breath caught. What kind of whispers? The man leaned forward, lowering his voice. They said he was obsessed after his wife and daughter died. He couldn't let go of them. And when a little girl came into his care after an accident, it was like he replaced what he lost. Emily's heart pounded. A replacement. Michael's fist tightened, fury radiating from him. "He stole you because he wanted to rebuild his family." The old man nodded grimly. "That's what people believed. No one dared question him. He was too powerful, too respected. But everyone could see. He treated that girl like she was his own, and he never let anyone ask questions." Emily's eyes blurred with tears. Her entire childhood, her identity had been built on this man's grief. I wasn't his daughter. I wasn't Emily Carter. I was Emily Turner, and he knew it. Michael placed a hand on her shoulder, steady but trembling. "And now the world is going to know it too. We're going to uncover every last secret he left behind." In that small town cafe, surrounded by strangers, the siblings realized the battle wasn't over. Richard Carter might be gone, but his shadow still haunted every part of Emily's stolen past, and they were ready to confront it. The old man's words echoed in Emily's ears long after they left the cafe. A replacement. That was what she had been to Richard Carter, a substitute for the family he had lost. Not a daughter, not even a person with her own past, just a piece of his grief, molded into something he could control. Michael gripped the steering wheel as they drove through the quiet streets of the town. His knuckles were white, his jaw set. Emily sat beside him, staring out the window, her eyes glassy with tears. Finally, they turned down a narrow road lined with trees. At the end stood a large, weathered house. Its wooden siding was cracked, the paint peeling. The windows were dark, curtains drawn. The garden, once tended, was now overrun with weeds. Emily felt a chill. Her breath caught in her throat. Something deep inside her stirred, a faint, unexplainable familiarity. Michael. I think I've been here before. Michael slowed the car and parked across the street. They sat in silence for a long moment, staring at the lifeless house. It was less a home than a mausoleum of secrets. This is it, Michael muttered. This is where he kept you. They crossed the street, the gravel crunching beneath their shoes. Emily's steps faltered, but Michael took her hand, steadying her. The house was locked, but a neighbor watering his lawn noticed them. He was a middle-aged man with kind eyes, and when Michael explained who they were, the man nodded knowingly. You're not the first to come looking. Ever since Carter died, people have had questions. But the one with the answers is his lawyer, Thomas Green. He's the one who cleaned out the house after Carter passed. Emily's heart pounded. Another name, another gatekeeper of her past. Do you know where we can find him? The neighbor pointed back toward the center of town. Small office above the post office. You can't miss it. Michael thanked him, but Emily lingered, her eyes fixed on the decaying house. She stepped closer to the porch, running her fingers along the weathered wood of the railing. Images flickered in her mind. Sitting on those steps as a little girl, clutching a doll, watching Carter's shadow move behind the curtains. She pulled her hand back sharply, shivering. I hate this place, she whispered. Michael wrapped an arm around her shoulder, protective. Then we'll leave it behind. We're not here to relive what he did to you. We're here to uncover it, so it can never haunt you again. But Emily knew it already haunted her. The house wasn't just a shell of wood and stone. It was the prison where her identity had been rewritten. They drove to Thomas Green's office, a small brick building with a faded sign. The second floor housed a modest law practice, the kind of place that smelled of paper and dust. Inside, behind a cluttered desk, sat a man in his 60s. His graying hair was combed neatly, and his glasses perched low on his nose. He looked up as they entered, eyes narrowing slightly. Can I help you? Michael spoke firmly. We're here about Richard Carter. My name is Michael Turner. This is my sister, Emily. We believe Carter took her after an accident and erased her identity. The lawyer's face paled. He removed his glasses slowly, as though the weight of the past had suddenly landed on his desk. Emily Turner, he murmured. So it's true. I always feared this day would come. Emily's stomach twisted. She leaned forward, her voice sharp with urgency. You knew what he did to me. The lawyer looked down, shame flickering in his eyes. I didn't know everything, but I found documents after his death, things I should have turned over. I told myself it was too late, but maybe it's not too late for you. He stood, walked to a locked cabinet, and pulled out a dusty box. Setting it on the desk, he slid it toward them. Everything Carter left behind. You deserve to see it. Michael and Emily exchanged a look. Their hands hovered over the box, hearts pounding. Inside, they knew, lay the truth, the answers they had chased through grief, lies, and years of silence, and whatever they found next would change everything. The office was silent except for the faint hum of an old ceiling fan. Dust rose as Thomas Green slid the box across his desk. Michael and Emily exchanged a tense glance before Michael slowly lifted the lid. Inside lay a collection of faded folders, envelopes, and handwritten notes. The papers smelled of age and secrecy, like ghosts trapped in ink. Emily's fingers trembled as she reached inside, pulling out the first folder. The top page bore her name, Emily Turner. Not Emily Carter. Emily Turner. Her breath caught. Tears welled in her eyes as she traced the letters with her fingertips. He knew who I was. He knew the truth all along. Michael clenched his jaw, his eyes burning with fury. He never lost track of you. He just erased me. Thomas leaned back in his chair, his expression heavy with guilt. I discovered those files after Carter passed. Adoption records, but forged. Medical notes rewritten. It was clear he had gone to great lengths to cover his tracks. Michael flipped through the pages, his hands shaking with rage. Look at this. He falsified the hospital discharge papers. He claimed custody under the emergency guardianship program. But these signatures don't match. He forged them. Emily's stomach twisted as she picked up a photograph tucked inside. It showed her as a little girl, no older than 6, sitting in a wooden chair with a blank expression. Standing behind her was Carter, his hand on her shoulder, his face stern and possessive. Emily shivered, her voice barely a whisper. I don't even remember this picture being taken. Thomas adjusted his glasses, speaking carefully. Carter lost his wife and daughter in the span of 2 years. He was broken, consumed by grief. And then, when you arrived after the accident, he saw in you a replacement, a way to rebuild what he lost. Emily's tears streamed freely now. So my entire childhood was built on a lie. Michael slammed his fist against the desk, startling both Emily and the lawyer. He didn't just lie. He stole you. He stole decades of our lives. Thomas sighed, lowering his gaze. He had influence, Michael, respect. People trusted him. No one questioned him when he claimed you were gone and that she had no family. It was a perfect deception. Emily pressed the photograph to her chest, sobbing quietly. For so long, she had lived in the shadow of an emptiness she couldn't explain. Now the emptiness had a name. Michael crouched beside her, his voice breaking. Emily, listen to me. None of this was your fault. He may have tried to erase who you are, but he couldn't. You're my sister. You always were. And now we can prove it. Emily looked up at him, her eyes raw with grief but flickering with hope. We have the proof. No one can deny it now. Thomas nodded solemnly. Yes, with these documents you can reclaim your identity. The world will know the truth about what happened to you. Michael closed the folder and exhaled slowly, his body trembling with the weight of both relief and rage. For years he had carried the unbearable loss of a sister he thought dead. Now the truth lay in his hands. Emily wiped her tears, her voice steadier than before. I may never get back the years I lost, but I won't live under his shadow anymore. I choose who I am now, and I choose to be Emily Turner again. Michael wrapped his arms around her, holding her tightly as if to promise he would never let her go again. The box of secrets sat open on the desk, its contents no longer hidden, but exposed to the light. And with it, a truth that neither lies nor time could bury. The box of files remained open on the desk, its contents spilling like ghosts finally set free. Michael and Emily sat in silence, each page, each document cutting deeper into wounds that had never healed. Emily's hands trembled as she held the forged adoption papers. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "All these years, I believed I was abandoned. I believed I didn't matter. And the whole time he knew. He knew I had a brother." Her words broke Michael's heart. He reached for her hand, gripping it tightly. "You were never abandoned, Emily. I searched for you every day of my life. They lied to both of us, but they couldn't kill the truth. And now it's here in front of us." Emily's tears blurred the ink on the pages. She remembered nights as a child, when she cried herself to sleep in foster homes, believing no one in the world wanted her. She remembered birthdays spent alone, faces of strangers she was told to call family. And now she realized none of it should have happened. Her sobs turned into a low, shaking laugh, bitter and broken. Do you know what's worse, Michael? Sometimes I loved him. Carter, he raised me. He gave me food, shelter. He called me his daughter. I thought I was safe with him. How can I hate him and remember him that way at the same time? Michael's chest tightened. He hated Carter for stealing Emily's life, but he also understood the complexity of her pain. He manipulated you. He built a life out of lies. That doesn't erase the good moments you remember, but it does explain why they never felt complete. Emily buried her face in her hands. My whole childhood was a prison painted to look like a home. Thomas Green, the lawyer, cleared his throat, his expression somber. You're not alone in that conflict. Carter's grief turned into obsession. He couldn't let go of what he lost, so he convinced himself it was justified to take you. But it was never justified. It was never right. Emily lifted her head, her eyes red but fierce. He stole my memories. He stole my name. He stole my brother from me. Michael leaned forward, his voice firm but tender. But he couldn't steal the bond between us. He tried to bury it, but it survived. That's why you always felt something missing. That's why I never stopped searching. The room was heavy with silence. Outside, the setting sun cast long shadows through the blinds, striping the office floor. Emily looked down at the photograph again, the one where she sat in the chair, Carter looming behind her. For years, she had believed she was just Emily Carter, a girl with no roots. Now she knew better. Her voice shook, but she spoke with determination. I want my life back. I want my name back. Michael nodded, tears brimming in his eyes. And you will. We'll make sure everyone knows who you really are. Thomas slid another envelope across the desk. These are Carter's personal notes, journals. He wrote about his wife and daughter. And about Emily. They'll give you more answers, but they won't be easy to read. Emily hesitated before opening the envelope. The handwriting was unmistakably Carter's, firm, meticulous, haunted. She began to read aloud. When I look at her, I see my little girl again. God gave me a second chance. I will not let anyone take her from me. They must never know. Emily's hands shook violently. Michael wrapped an arm around her shoulders as she sobbed. The truth was undeniable now. She had been taken, hidden, reshaped into someone else's fantasy. But in that moment of anguish, something else burned through her tears. Resolve. For the first time in her life, she wasn't lost. She wasn't abandoned. She had a brother. She had a name, and no lie could erase that ever again. The office was thick with silence, broken only by the rustle of old papers. The box sat open on the desk, its contents spilling like veins of the past. Michael's pulse pounded as he rifled through the files, searching for something more concrete than forged forms and broken memories. Then he froze. A thin envelope lay buried at the bottom, sealed and yellowed with age. On the front, in Richard Carter's handwriting, were the words, "For Emily." Michael's throat tightened. He slid the envelope across the desk toward his sister. Emily hesitated, her hands trembling. The weight of decades sat inside that fragile paper. With a shaky breath, she tore it open. Inside was a letter. She unfolded it carefully, the ink faded but legible. Her voice cracked as she read aloud, "I know what I've done cannot be undone. I told myself I was saving you, giving you a life after tragedy. But in truth I was saving myself. I couldn't bear the silence after my wife and daughter died. When I saw you, I saw them, and so I lied. I made the world believe you were gone. I made myself believe you were mine." Emily's vision blurred. The page trembled in her hands. Each word was a confession, but it felt like a knife driven deeper into her chest. She continued, her voice breaking, "If one day you discover the truth, know this. I did love you. Not as I should have, not as your brother would have, but as a man clinging to the ashes of his own life. I was selfish. Forgive me if you can." Emily dropped the letter onto the desk, her sobs tearing through the quiet office. Michael wrapped his arms around her, holding her as if he could shield her from the words on the page. "You don't have to forgive him," Michael whispered fiercely. "You don't owe him anything. He stole you. He stole our lives. But he didn't win, because here you are, with me." Emily clung to her brother, the letter crumpling under her trembling hand. "I don't know how to feel. Part of me hates him. Part of me pities him. But most of all, I just want my life back. I want to be me again." Michael pulled back just enough to look into her tear-filled eyes. "And you will. We'll show the world the truth. We'll show them who you really are." Thomas Green, the lawyer, cleared his throat softly. He slid another folder forward, thicker than the rest. "These are the forged adoption records Carter used. And here," he pulled out a certificate, yellowed and torn. "Your original birth certificate, Emily Turner. It proves everything. With these, no one can deny who you are." Emily reached for the certificate, her tears falling onto the page. Her name, Turner, stared back at her, undeniable, unchangeable. It was the piece of herself she thought had been lost forever. Michael brushed a tear from her cheek. "Oh, he tried to erase you, but he failed. This paper is proof, and I am proof. You are my sister, Emily Turner. Nothing will ever take that away again." For the first time, Emily felt the weight of the lies lifting. The letter was painful, but the birth certificate was liberating. Her past had been stolen, her childhood rewritten, but her identity was finally hers again. She held the certificate to her chest, whispering through her tears, "I'm Emily Turner, and I'm finally home." Michael closed the box of secrets with a firm hand, his voice steady and resolute. "It's over. He's gone. His lies are dead with him. But you're alive, and we're together again." And in that cramped office, beneath the dim glow of a single lamp, the siblings found the final piece of the puzzle. The truth was no longer hidden. The past was no longer a shadow. For the first time in decades, Emily was free. The night air was cool when Michael and Emily stepped out of Thomas Green's office. The box of documents was heavy in Michael's arms, but not as heavy as the decades of grief that had just been lifted from his soul. The street lamps cast a soft glow on the quiet town, and for the first time since their reunion, silence felt peaceful. They drove in quiet reflection, neither needing to fill the air with words. Emily sat with her hands resting on her lap, clutching her birth certificate as if it were a lifeline. Michael kept glancing at her from behind the wheel, his heart overflowing with something he hadn't dared to feel in years: hope. Eventually, they pulled into a small park on the edge of town. The sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving streaks of purple and gold across the sky. They walked together to a wooden bench beneath a swaying oak tree, sitting side by side. Michael reached into his jacket and pulled out a photograph, worn from years of being folded and unfolded. It was of two children, himself and Emily, laughing in the backyard of their old home. He handed it to her with trembling hands. "I carried this my whole life," he said softly. "It was the only piece of you I had left." Emily stared at the photograph, her tears blurring the smiling faces. She pressed it to her chest and let the sobs come, but this time they weren't just sobs of grief. They were of release, of healing. "I don't remember everything," she whispered, "but I feel it. I feel us. I feel home when I'm with you." Michael pulled her into a tight embrace. They clung to each other as though afraid the world might tear them apart again. For years he had dreamed of this moment, prayed for it, wept for it. Now with his sister in his arms, it felt like a miracle. "You were never gone, Emily," Michael murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "Not in here." He placed a hand over his heart. "You lived here the whole time." Emily tightened her grip around him. "And you lived in mine. Even when I didn't understand why there was a hole in my life, it was shaped like you. The weight of Carter's lies still lingered, but it no longer defined them." The documents, the letter, the truth. They were tools to reclaim what had been stolen. But the real victory was this: two siblings, torn apart by tragedy and deception, reunited by a bond stronger than death itself. They sat on the bench as night fell, the stars slowly appearing above them. For the first time in decades, Michael felt whole. For the first time in her life, Emily felt free. She looked at him, her eyes glistening with tears but shining with certainty. "I'm Emily Turner, and I'm your sister. Nothing can take that away again." Michael smiled through his tears, pulling her close. "No, nothing ever will." And in that moment, beneath the endless night sky, their story wasn't about loss anymore. It was about survival, about love, about the kind of reunion that defies even the finality of death, because sometimes miracles don't happen in the blinding light of heaven. Sometimes they happen in the quiet halls of a hospital, when a man looks up and sees the sister he thought was gone forever. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to leave your like. It helps more people discover true stories of love and reunion. Subscribe to Life Reunions and ring the bell so you don't miss the next emotional story we share here. And now, tell us in the comments, from which city and country are you watching? We'd love to know how far these stories of love and destiny are traveling.